My name's Danny. I'm an environmental author, researcher, activist and performance poet. I've been involved in networks and groups for a good few years now, things like Climate Camp, No Dash for Gas, Reclaim the Power and the Art Not Oil Coalition. Those are the sort of things I'm mixed up in. I've been put on the agenda as speaking about sort of looking at this from an environmental framework. I'm actually going to speak specifically from the perspective of energy, technology and climate change, because that's my particular area of work and expertise. That's where I feel I've done the most and I know the most about. But I'm not saying that this is the only interface between technology and the environment, obviously, and I think we're definitely going to hear loads more examples through the weekend. But this is obviously it's a really big interface between technology and the natural world and the environment, and also I think it's quite a good illustration of what's going on. So I'm going to talk about it really briefly. And there's a few interlinked points that I'd like to make. And one is the whole issue of energy technology currently being driven by, in shorthand, by profit rather than by need. The second point is that there's this powerful idea of technological progress that's embedded in our politics and culture at the moment that is making it much more difficult to get to these kind of the correct scale, appropriate technologies for a safe climate. And I think that's the bit of what I'm going to say that's probably going to mesh with the sort of topics that have been proposed for this weekend. But I also want to quickly make the point at the end that different types of energy technology have different potential to be under democratic control or under community control, and there are differences between energy technologies. So the first point about, hey, it's all about profit, not what we actually need from energy, is probably not a massive shocker to the people gathered in this room today, that I would say that. But yeah, I mean, essentially what we're seeing at the moment is a drive by governments and corporations to answer the wrong question about energy. And the question they're trying to answer is, how do we maintain energy growth? How do we maintain the current system that we have, which is of overconsumption by the few at the expense of everybody else, in a way that maximises profit for the companies involved? More all the time, rather than how much do we actually need? And to do that, there's this real focus on big technology, on sort of dominating the natural world, of squeezing as much energy out of everything as possible, and which comes first in terms of driving those things. I'm sure we'll talk about. So it's not surprising that the energy technology we've ended up with lately has really focused on. On the one hand, on extracting more and more extreme forms of fossil fuels, whether that's fracking or tar sands or Arctic drilling, offshore drilling, but also other forms of extreme energy like nuclear power, biofuels, and now even people talking about geoengineering in the sense of, rather than dealing with the climate crisis, let's just try to use technology to change the natural systems of the planet to somehow adapt to it, which is terrifying stuff. And even the wind and solar, no technology is completely clean and without negative impact, but even those that have a lower impact aren't necessarily solving the problem, because a lot of the wind and solar that's being installed at the moment isn't actually replacing fossil fuels. It's just adding to overall energy consumption. And we can build all the wind turbines and solar panels we like, but if we're not shutting down coal plants and oil wells at the same time, then we're not actually doing anything to help climate change. So,
yes. They're knocking down the power station.
They are, and I mean it's patchy across the world, and there is some progress on that in the UK, thanks to a lot of campaigning by people to stop new coal power stations in the UK, and the old ones are reaching the end of their lives. But they have recently voted to extend the life of some of the old coal power stations in the UK, so there's still very much a fight to go on there. But that's a whole other topic. but generally, and there are examples of renewables replacing fossil fuels in some areas, which is great, but it's very patchy and it's not necessarily the norm. And the kind of profit-driven framework through which we're currently developing technology it means that even some forms of renewable technology are being done in a way that maintain inequalities of power, control and access to energy. And one example is a project that's being proposed to build giant solar generators in North Africa, in the desert, which sounds great until you find out that actually the energy isn't being generated for the people of North Africa, it's being generated to take under the ocean to power Europe. and yeah.
Yeah, so actually, I don't think we want to have questions in the middle of Danny's talk, actually. We'll just,
Yeah.
Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'm that's very, very abbreviated version of what's happening, and I'm sure we can talk about that project in more detail. I just want to give it as an example of something that is happening, that on the face, where these kind of large-scale renewable technologies aren't necessarily always being done in the most equitable way. So the question we should be asking really is not how much energy can we get, but how much energy do we need? And this is a question that I worked on a project recently called 2energyfutures.org, sorry, and I'll pop this up here and hopefully it'll stay up. So 2energyfutures.org. The idea was to develop an interactive online infographic showing a model of how we could give everyone in the world enough energy they needed using purely renewable sources. So I'm going to fling a few numbers at you, but only a few, and I'm going to explain them. So the first question was, how much energy do we actually need? Now there's a calculation that's been helpfully done by the Centre for Alternative Technology in Wales, of where they've said, well, how much energy do we need for what we think of as a modern life, but if we actually did all the stuff that we know we need to do, of like ending massive car culture, having decent public transport and cycle facilities, properly insulated homes, locally grown organic food, an end to massive plastic overconsumption, much more local manufacturing, all the things that we actually know we need to go and get on with, and also a reduction in flights to a sensible level. If we did all that stuff, how much energy on average per person would we need? And it turns out the answer that they came to was 13,000 kilowatt hours per person per year. And that's including everything. That's not just home energy, but that's all transport and also public services and everything done on our behalf. Now this figure isn't like get sort of everyone living an agrarian existence. In this scenario, we still have hospitals and public services and cinemas and sports stadiums and all that sort of stuff. It's just, this is the kind of the sort of efficient eco version that they're, I guess, envisioning in their scenario. And to give you a sense of scale, at the moment, the European average per person energy use is 48,000 for the EU. And in the US and Canada, it's around about 80 to 90,000 kilowatt hours. So that's the comparison. So we're talking
kilowatt hours per year, or?
Per person per year. Per person per year. And all these numbers it's all explained in more detail on this website if you want more. I'm just going to go through it really quickly. So it's okay. Oh, well, look, actually, we can all have a good quality of life, but on less than a third of what the current EU average energy use. So what does that mean for the whole world? Well, and again, in this particular website, we tell you, let's imagine it's 20 years in the future. We've got almost 7 billion people on the planet. And we want to make sure that everyone, and again, this is equity, has to be at the heart of what we're talking about. If we say anyone on the planet wants this level of energy, then we have to be sure that it can be accessible to everybody on the planet. We're not saying everybody wants this sort of lifestyle, but in order to be fair, we need to make sure that it is at least in theory available to everybody. So is there enough renewable energy to give everyone this level of energy if they want it? And so we then took a source, Professor David Mackay, who is a government energy advisor. He's very mainstream. He's not particularly radical in any way. He's sort of generally seen as made some very conservative estimates as to how much we could generate using existing renewable technologies only. So we thought, okay, well, we'll look at his figures of how much could we generate using existing renewable technologies and measure that against how much we actually need to get this level. Yeah, 1 minute left. So to wrap this up and to summarise, where's the blue pen? There. So if we multiply this up to almost 7 billion people, we get to this figure here. if everyone on the planet was to have this, we would need 112 million kilowatt hours, which is what we'd need to generate. I'll use a better unit, which is petawatt hours. That's how much we'd need. According to David Mackay, this 170 petawatt hours is how much we could generate already using existing just wind and solar. And there's another 30 in hydro, geothermal, tidal and waves. Sorry, no, petawatts, sorry. That's why I'm trying to do things too quickly to fit in the last minute. So the point here is, and I'd love to talk about this more after the break, and what this means, is that this idea that we need this drive for bigger, more technology, whether that's more sort of advanced renewables or nuclear fusion or whatever it might be, is basically, it's a sort of ridiculous idea that is kind of being forced on us, and that we have this kind of cultural preconception that the way we solve problems is by having more and more bigger technology and more control, and actually the technology that we already have is already nearly twice what we need to give everyone the energy we need. And that's why I'm making that example. Thank you.